This Timotheus Academy content is specifically about Art Deco, but generally speaking, it is about far more than this, as we will discuss a great many things, all of which are in some way connected to our main point, that is Art Deco. It was mentioned in a previous Timotheus Academy episode that there would be a future episode devoted to Art Deco, and here it is. What is the first part of 3 regarding the design commitment known as Art Deco. In this episode, we will focus on some foundational matters that need to be considered to understand design commitments themselves, an understanding of which is critical to our understanding Art Deco. Perhaps many things come to mind when you think of Art Deco: the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, buildings in South Beach or even Havana, the incredible Mercury train from the 1930s, the modern-day Orient Express, the Batman animated series Gotham City Lego set, Cartier jewelry, a 1930 Mercedes-Benz SSK, or maybe even the one and only 1925 Rolls-Royce Phantom, which is likely the most beautiful car ever built, much to the chagrin of fans of the 1936 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic, including Ralph Lauren. Perhaps many things come to mind when you think of Art Deco, but perhaps nothing comes to your mind when you think of Art Deco, as you've never even heard of Art Deco and you aren't aware of anything that may or may not be Art Deco at all. Well, if you fall into either of these categories, then this Timotheus Academy content is for you. It happens to be the case that this content is somewhat timely, as there are an increasing number of modern-day discussions regarding Art Deco. Recently, on January 8, 2025, the Associated Press released an article titled, "Art Deco Style is Popular Again, a Century After Its Heyday." The author is Kim Cook. The article references another article published for Elle Decor on March 8, 2024, titled, "Here's What to Know About Art Deco Architecture." The author of that article is Arika Elin Sanson. In Sanson's article, she writes the following: "Ask 3 historians to define the term Art Deco, and you'll likely get 3 varying answers. That's because Art Deco is many different things to many different people." End quote. This is also quoted in the Associated Press article by Cook that was mentioned previously. Yet is the statement correct? It seems that the notion Sanson espouses is that different people have different understandings about Art Deco. This is why you may get 3 varying definitions of Art Deco, that is, because Art Deco is different things to different people. But the question we are interested in is not what Art Deco is to different people. The question is what Art Deco is. Sanson does go on to describe some aspects of Art Deco, but she does seem to focus on the fact that there is a great difference in what people seem to understand regarding Art Deco. For many, a comprehensive understanding, or a robust definition of what Art Deco is, seems to be missing. It also seems to be quite elusive. This seems to be somewhat the case for any architecture or design, meaning it seems to be somewhat elusive to define any design or architecture. Defining mid-century modern or neoclassical or Egyptian revival would in fact be a difficult thing for many people to do, as the task of offering such definitions is no less than stating the principles of different design commitments. But it seems to be more difficult even to define Art Deco than it is perhaps other design commitments, likely because the very principles of Art Deco as a design commitment are themselves somewhat difficult to identify for many people. While Art Deco may be vaguely recognizable to many, it seems that a picture really is worth 1,000 words, and it would take several thousand words to begin to describe the principles of Art Deco as a design commitment. Usually we at Timotheus Academy like to begin any discussion by defining our topic. This is something vitally important because definitions limit. If we do not define something, then our discussion cannot be clear. So some brief and I would say tentative definition of Art Deco is needed here, even though we will define Art Deco in a much more robust way in the second part of this 3-part episode. We can define Art Deco at this point simply as the following: a design commitment which gained great popularity from the mid-1920s until the late 1930s, manifested in architecture, art, jewelry, transportation, fashion, furniture, and even more. As a design commitment, the principles of Art Deco usually will include ornamentation that utilizes straight lines and angles that are arranged symmetrically and often complexly, often too presented in very dramatic ways with bold dramatic colors. It is the case that there are times when there is a departure from this in Art Deco design, but usually there's a reason that that is the case. Art Deco itself usually is used to reflect a great estimation of the future and a confidence in the possibility of progress. This should be sufficient as a definition simply to limit our discussion here in this part of this episode. For now, as the task of further defining Art Deco still lays before us, we can move on to what a design commitment is. I've spoken of Art Deco as a design commitment, but what do I mean by that? When I discuss design commitments, I mean to bring to mind and describe styles of design, each of which has principles which are parts that integrate into a whole and result in a specific design. We might call these design commitments by names such as mid-century modern, Gothic or Gothic revival, brutalist, Art Deco, etc. Each of the design commitments I have just mentioned have great differences between them. But there can be design commitments that are very nuanced in their differences as well, such as those we might call Victorian, Jacobean, Edwardian, etc. Design commitments have principles, the combination of which results in the overall style of the design. The principles of these design commitments make them very different from one another, just like different ingredients in a recipe will result in very different meals. Art Deco is a design commitment which has principles that include ornamentation that normally utilize straight lines and angles that are, again, normally arranged symmetrically and often complexly, and again are normally presented in very dramatic ways with bold dramatic colors. These are some of the principles that go into and make up the design commitment known as Art Deco. There are other design commitments that do not utilize these specific principles, which is why they look and feel very different. The question, though, is when we look at different design commitments, are we able to make aesthetic judgments? This is a big question. Can we as individuals judge design commitments regarding their beauty? And can we judge a specific design commitment as being more beautiful than another? More fundamental is whether there is such a thing as intrinsic or inherent value at all, be it moral value or aesthetic value. Regarding moral value, is there something right about charity, and is there something wrong about thievery? Something right and wrong about these respective things that does not reduce simply to our opinion or our preferences. Is there a real morality that we can know, that we can point to, and that we can use to make moral judgments? That's a very important question. We are specifically asking here regarding aesthetic value, is there something beautiful that does not reduce merely to opinion and preference? Is there something beautiful about the artwork of Rembrandt that is lacking if we should spill paint on our driveway? Is there real beauty that we can know and that we can point to and that we can use to make aesthetic judgments? Let me answer some of these questions now. There is such a thing as real morality that does not reduce to our personal opinions or preferences. There is such a thing as real beauty that does not reduce to our opinions personally or our personal preferences. We certainly can make moral judgments. We certainly can make aesthetic judgments. Not only can we do these things, we must do these things. Now, some people will disagree with what I just said. They will say there is no difference in value. If they go so far as to say there is no difference in moral value, They will normally abandon their position when someone picks their pocket. They will be able to affirm, with no reservations whatsoever, that the picking of their pocket was morally wrong. Moral value is not really our topic here, at least not directly. Some will go to say that there is no difference in aesthetic value, no difference in the beauty of different design commitments. Perhaps they do this because they believe all design commitments are of equal value, meaning that they would affirm that Gothic and Brutalist design commitments are just of equal value. Or perhaps they would deny that we can make aesthetic judgments because they claim that value cannot be discovered, and so we cannot make judgments in the absence of being able to discover value. So then they would claim the value of Gothic and Brutalist designs cannot be discovered. We simply cannot know what the value of these are aesthetically, and so then by default they are of equal aesthetic value. Obviously, these ideas are far from the normal experience. People tend to think that beauty can be identified when present. People generally think that some things are more beautiful than other things. But let's look at these a little more closely. Going back to the first of these ideas or claims, the belief that all designs are equal in value, aesthetically, equal in their beauty, and so one design commitment cannot be more valuable in terms of aesthetics than another. In my experience, those who claim that all designs are of equal value and beauty really are making this argument to try to defend a design that is of obvious less value and beauty. Someone trying to defend the value and beauty of a banana taped to a blank canvas with duct tape might argue that all designs are of equal value and beauty, that a banana taped to a blank canvas with duct tape is of equal value and beauty as a Rembrandt piece, or a Monet, or a Degas, or a Vermeer. But the aesthetic value of a banana attached to a canvas with duct tape is actually quite hard to find. I cannot imagine someone defending the value and beauty of a Rembrandt, or a Monet, or Degas, or a Vermeer by saying it is of equal value and beauty to a banana taped to a blank canvas with duct tape, because the aesthetic value of a Rembrandt piece is obvious to all who see it. Sir Roger Scruton was speaking at an event, and he was asked a question. The video of this occurrence is widely available on the internet. The questioner was a teacher trying to describe to his students that not all books were of equal value. There are books that are good, and there are books that are bad. But he went about doing so, as he described, by claiming to his students that music by Bach was objectively superior to what was being produced by Lady Gaga. Apparently, then, the students were quite displeased by such a judgment. Roger Scruton then went on to describe that the mind can become accustomed to the droning beat and the lack of melody in some music, and that it is a great jump to go from Lady Gaga to Bach. He suggested that perhaps contrasting Lady Gaga to Elvis would be a more understandable comparison, because something objective like a melody is present in Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel, yet absent in Lady Gaga's Poker Face. So even from this very brief discussion, it should be obvious that we can make aesthetic judgments. We can make judgments regarding the beauty of different things, and we can even make aesthetic comparisons. And these aesthetic comparisons and judgments do not merely reduce to something subjective, but there are objective elements to things that we can clearly point to that account for why something is more beautiful and something less. What then about the second option we discussed previously? That is, the belief that objective value cannot be understood regarding different designs because it cannot be discovered at all. It was the philosopher David Hume who argued that we cannot derive an objective value from what we understand to be a fact about reality. If then values cannot be derived from facts, what ought to be cannot be derived from what is in Hume's philosophy. And then, how can there be any evaluation of value at all if what Hume is saying is true? This would be applicable to moral value, as charity and burglary would be equally mysterious to us. We could not judge the moral value of either, of course, until our pockets were picked, and then it would be very clear. But what about design commitments? Is it the case that we are at a complete loss regarding the value of anything aesthetic in the entire world, which would be the conclusion of David Hume's philosophy? While we can easily, here at this point, deny that David Hume is correct and deny that we have an inability to discover value from facts about reality, what might the result of David Hume's philosophy be if what he describes were to be accepted regarding aesthetics? The only possibility, if David Hume's philosophy were to be accepted, is that designs might be different, and the goal would be for designs to be different. In a world where the value of designs is not able to be discovered, the goal of design can only be something that is different. It can only be something that is new. Being different would then just be the goal of different design commitments. Let me ask a question. Is that not where we find architecture today? With the monstrous buildings that are being built all around the world? Let me ask another question. Is this not where architecture has been for some time? This is the case, whether the architects that are designing these buildings know it or not. They are building buildings based upon what David Hume has argued philosophically, that we cannot derive value regarding aesthetics from facts about reality. And so the only thing we can do is produce something that is new and produce something that is different from what came before. Let me give an example of this. In September of 2023, Dr. Dan Morrill authored a brief work called The Architectural Significance and Brief History of the Early Years of the Smith-Richter House, in which he quoted the architect of the Smith-Richter House, whose name is Arthur Gould Odell, Jr. Odell gave a speech at the Mint Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1952, and this is what Odell claimed in that speech, and I quote, "It is quite natural that most people resent new designs and radically different ideas. Probably when the first cathedral was built in Europe, the people of that time resented it because it didn't resemble older buildings of that time." Now, Odell's statements must surely be built upon several assumptions. One of the things he seems to be stating is that the rejection of the new and different is not based on anything rational. Is this not what David Hume argued regarding value? That value, be it moral or even we would say extending it to the aesthetic, is simply a reflection of personal preference and opinion? Odell then understands that architects must push forward for that which is new and different, even if the people do not like it. He says, and I quote, "It is quite natural that most people resent new designs and radically different ideas." Why is he describing designs in those terms? New and different. Whether Odell understood it or not, this is the outcome when Hume's philosophy is accepted. Continuing, Odell says the following, and I quote, "The architect of today has to plan to make use of all the new scientific inventions that will make buildings primarily more comfortable and useful for their occupants. The Parthenon of Greece was built before steel and glass and other materials that we take for granted today were invented. Had the Greeks of that time had these materials, the Parthenon would not have been built as it was." I do realize in both of these Odell quotes, there are these huge statements, one about cathedrals, one about the Parthenon, that we would like to stop and examine. Even though we would like to do that, we need to focus on what we are trying to understand. Odell seems to be saying that the task of an architect is to build structures that are new and different from the previous quote, and that incorporate new inventions. The specific examples of this are steel and glass. Both of these statements that the architect Arthur Odell made in 1952 seem to be claiming that the goal of design is something different. If someone accepts the philosophy of David Hume, which they shouldn't, it's the only possible goal of design. This is where we find architecture today. This is where architecture has been for some time. So then, returning to the previous questions, can we make aesthetic judgments regarding design commitments and regarding beauty? Can we make aesthetic judgments regarding a design commitment being more beautiful than another? And fundamental to these are questions such as, is there such a thing as value at all? The answer is yes. Can real judgments be made regarding value? The answer again is yes. Can we make judgments that do not merely reduce to opinion and preference? The answer is yes. The answer is yes to these questions. The value of all things is not equal. Not all designs are beautiful. Not all acts are morally good. We can make judgments about value. Some designs are beautiful. Some are not. Some acts are morally good. Some are not. We can say a Gothic design commitment is objectively superior to a brutalist design commitment. We can say a Gothic cathedral is more beautiful than a brutalist monstrosity. These are value statements. These are value judgments. They do not reduce to feelings, but they arise from different facts. Facts about reality. Yes, different design commitments can have a subjective element. A Gothic cathedral can amaze those who see it. They may have not ever seen anything like it. They may not have even known that something like that could be built. It's so beautiful. But also a brutalist monstrosity can depress people who see it. They can say to themselves, I never knew something like that could be built, but mean I never knew something so monstrous could be built. And sometimes that's even the point of different design commitments. Sometimes Gothic design can be used in a cathedral to have people's minds lifted to contemplate the divine by Gothic designs. Also, it can be the case that brutalist designs can be used to depress, can be used to make people feel badly about life and about what is possible. This has been the case in very oppressive regimes, that brutalist architecture was used for this very reason. But design should not only be reduced to how we feel about it, even if it can make us feel different ways. There are objective reasons that Gothic design is superior to brutalism, including, but not limited to, principles of proportion that are utilized in Gothic designs, as well as the materials that are utilized, as well as the scale, etc., etc. We can say with confidence that a Gothic cathedral is more beautiful than a brutalist monstrosity. We can say with confidence that a Rembrandt piece is superior to that of Jackson Pollock. We can say that Bach's cello suite is superior to Lady Gaga's Poker Face. We can say this, and we should say this. One of the questions, though, is if these judgments can be made, who are the ones that can make them? Can only architects make value judgments about the beauty of structures? Let me just say, if someone makes this claim and believes it to be true, there is a great confusion that needs to be remedied. Architecture is not the science that deals in beauty per se. Not at all. Even if the matter of beauty has today been largely delegated to architects. Beauty itself, and what is beautiful, is addressed by that branch of philosophy known as aesthetics, which receives its task and its tools from that philosophy known as metaphysics. David Hume rejected scholastic metaphysics, which eventually led him to make his fact-value error. Of course, architecture is vitally important in that architecture takes designs, interprets them so that they can be built in real three-dimensional space, and so that people can go inside of them, and so that people can be inside of them, and so that people can be safe inside of them, and even live inside of them or work inside of them. Yes, architecture is vitally important, as engineers are important as well. But architecture, nor is engineering, the science that studies beauty. Not only is the notion that only architects can make value judgments about the beauty of structures a false notion, but being an architect is not really even directly related to making value judgments about the beauty of structures. Which is why some of the most beautiful structures that have ever been built were not designed by vocational architects, at least not designed by vocational architects in the sense of what we understand that to be today. So now we have discussed some foundational matters that needed to be considered to understand designs themselves. Though this part is drawing to a close, one can move on to the second part of this Timotheus discussion related to Art Deco, specifically regarding the context of design commitments leading up to the emergence of Art Deco, and also specifically including a far more detailed attempt to define and understand what Art Deco is. These and more will be discussed in the second part of this Timotheus discussion regarding Art Deco.